Yo, what up guys, I'm Sammy and welcome back to the Soul Drop, and today we're going to be doing a versus video between the Puma Hali 1 and the Puma MB.05. So pretty much Tyrese Haliburton's first signature shoe with Puma versus Lamelo Ball's fifth signature shoe with Puma, right? So of course they're both Puma hoop shoes, and also the price is exactly the same. So they both retail for 130 bucks. And yeah, I thought this would be a pretty good versus video. So if you guys do want to cop either of these shoes, I try to leave in the affiliate link in the description box. If you do choose to get either of these shoes, it does help me out if you buy it through the affiliate link in the description box. And as always, thank you guys so much for all the support. And also, if you guys have any questions, you guys can always DM me over at Instagram. I try to get to all my DMs, so yeah, let's get it started right off with the Tracciones. So for the outsole here in the Hali 1, it is using a fully translucent rubber with like this herringbone traction pattern. And then here in the MB.05, I guess it is more of a chaotic herringbone traction pattern, but it's a little bit more storytelling, right? We got the number 1, we got a skull, which says 1 of 1, right? So yeah, in terms of like actual bite, I would say the Hali 1 has a harder bite, right? So if you're playing on a clean court, the Hali 1 is freaking phenomenal. You have a really nice hard stop, very nice loud high pitched squeak as well. It's like a really squeaky shoe, which of course squeak has nothing to do with performance. But here in the MB.05, you do need to break it in, right? And once you do break it in though, it does have a very nice solid bite. But again, I don't think it's as hard of a stop as the Hali 1. And also the MB.05 is squeaky a little bit, just a tiny bit. Once you break it in, it gets a little bit louder, but it's not as loud or as squeaky as the Hali 1, right? So yeah, in terms of overall stopping power, especially on a clean court, the Hali 1's a little bit better, right? But once you add dust into the equation, yeah, the Hali 1 is really bad, right? So the Hali 1 is a dust magnet. It picks up dust extremely quickly, and once it picks up dust, it's affected by that dust and starts to slide around very easily as well. Because some shoes, even if it does pick up a little bit of dust, it still bites through dust kind of well, and you don't need to wipe immediately, right? But for me, in my personal experience, the Hali 1, right when it picked up dust, I had to wipe, and then it had really good stops again, but it will pick up dust really quickly, right? So dust performance, even on a slightly dusty court, I just really didn't like playing in the Hali 1s too much, right? However, here in the MB.05s is a lot better on dust. It picks up less dust and also bites through dust a little bit better than the Hali 1. So if you're playing on a slightly dusty court to a moderately dusty court, I would say the MB.05 is better than the Hali 1, right? However, if you're playing on the super dusty court, I feel like most hoop shoes not gonna be amazing, but MB.05, it does pick up that dust, but it's not absolutely horrendous, you know what I mean? So dust performance, the MB.05 is a tiny bit better. In terms of durability, yeah, the MB.05 is gonna be terrible, right? Look at the grooves. The grooves are extremely thin. Also, the rubber is really freaking soft. However, here in the Hali 1, it's gonna be extremely good for outdoor use, right? I mean, the rubber is really freaking hard. You got a lot of grooves, so you have a lot of surface area. The grooves seem pretty deep as well, so you should be fine, or actually the Hali 1 is going to be a lot better for outdoor use than the MB.05, so there's that. And one thing, however, which is miscellaneous, is the MB.05 does have a little bit of an outsole curvature, right? So it's rounded right over here, and the rubber comes up a little bit more on the medial side of the shoe, so you have better grip when you're doing these types of movements. However, here in the Hali 1, not as much. Like, look at how squared off it is, right? So it's really edged out, so you don't really feel that type of like smoothness. It's more edged out, you know, a little bit more slappy. You know what I mean? So yeah, in terms of overall traction for me, what did I like better? I think I like the MB.05 just a tiny bit better, because when I was testing both of these shoes, you know, I'm playing on dustier courts, right? So the MB.05 was just better for dust, and I did like the outsole curvature a little bit better as well, as opposed to the Hali 1. But I guess, you know, I did like the Hali 1 when I was playing on a super duper clean court though, you know. So there's the traction there. Moving on to the heel to toe transition, that's also something that's extremely different in both of the shoes, right? So the MB.05 has a really smooth feel to it, especially if you're doing heel dominant strides down the court, right? So if you're doing like a fast break or something like that, and you're trying to really quickly get to the other side of the court, this is really smooth feeling, right? So here in the heel, first of all, it's pretty much fully exposed for the midsole, so there's a lot of heel compression, right? So that feels smooth, right? Very soft here in the heel. Coming into the forefoot, we do have a pretty nice curve shape, but also here in the forefoot is pretty dang easy to flex, right? It's not super easy, you know, like the Sabrina 3s, but it's still pretty easy easy to flex. It has a really flexible feel, so it's not like super springy, but here in the Hali one, it definitely feels a little bit stiffer. So here in the heel, you can see all this rubber, and the rubber is really, look at this. It's so freaking stiff. So it definitely feels a little bit clunkier. However, the nitro foam is pretty soft, so that definitely does help it not feel as boot-like, but it definitely does feel clunkier than the MB.05 in the heel. Here in the forefoot though, you do have a very nice curve shape still. That feels really nice though, right? However, the Hali 1 is a lot freaking stiffer. Like, you can't really bend it at all here in the forefoot, right? And you can see the plate. I don't know why it's so freaking stiff, but here in the forefoot, it really doesn't bend too much. And then here in the midfoot, look at that, right? So it definitely has a way stiffer feel, way more explosive as well, especially out of your first step. So that's definitely one thing that I really noticed is a huge difference in both of these shoes, right? This is way more soft, flexible, and nimble feeling. Hali 1 way stiffer. So it's not that one is better than the other. It just depends on what you like to feel a little bit better, right? For me, I would say I like the MB.05 better because even with the Hali 1, it's just too stiff to even feel like explosive in my personal opinion, right? So yeah, there's the heel to toe transition. Moving on to the cushioning setup. So on paper, they should be the exact same, right? But they're actually quite different from what I felt, right, when I was playing both of the shoes. So in terms of tech, they're both using full-length nitro foam, right? So it says nitro here on the medial side in the Hali 1s. Does it say nitro foam here in the MB.05s anywhere? Actually, it doesn't, but it is using full-length nitro foam, right? They both have nice cushion, however, they're both pretty bad for core feel, right? So if you want a really low-to-the-ground setup, both of these shoes are not the best. However, it's weird because the Hali 1 has a crazy offset. You know what I mean? So here in the forefoot, I would say is a tiny bit lower to the ground than the MB.05, but then like the MB.05 is way flatter or a little bit more level feeling, right? And then you got the Hali 1s, which is like this, you know what I mean? So the MB.05 is like this, and then the Hali 1 is more like this. So it has, the Hali 1 is a little bit higher up off the ground here in the heel, but then a little bit lower to the ground here in the forefoot, and then the MB.05 is just kind of high up off the ground, you know what I mean? So it's just a weird feel. It all depends on what you like. If you like to have a very high offset, the Hali 1 is going to be a little bit better. If you want something a little bit flatter, the MB.05 is better, right? However, I do like the MB.05 overall cushioning setup a little bit better because you do have a lot more heel compression, which does feel more comfortable to me, as opposed to the Hali 1. I mean, the Hali 1's still kind of soft, but I feel like they caged it a little bit too much. And also this rubber, again, is really stiff. You know what I mean? And if you compare it to the medial side of the shoe, which is like pretty much fully, look at this, fully exposed, you can see all this cage from the rubber. So not a huge fan of that. Also, another difference is the underfoot cushion. I don't know why, but for me, once I broke it in, the MB.05 underfoot cushion is really soft, right? So when I start playing, once I start jogging, doing jump shots and stuff like that, well, pretty much once I start playing, it gets soft. You know, it's not super bouncy, but it's just really plush underfoot, and it's the entire footbed. You know, it's a little bit softer in the heel, but, you know, again, pretty much the entire footbed is soft. However, here in the Hali 1, it's just stiffer. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, you know, if you are heavier than me, it's probably going to be a little bit easier to feel. But for me, it just feels a little bit stiffer for the underfoot cushion here in the Hali 1 compared to the MB.05. So, yeah, and also it was never mushy or too soft for me. You know, it's just a soft, comfy, plush feel, right? So, for me, I like the MB.05 way better. And also because of the heel compression. The Hali 1 feels a little bit more clunky, a little bit more boot-like, and a little bit stiffer for the underfoot cushion. Overall impact protection is good in both of the shoes, however, right? So I feel like most people, again, because of that, will like the MB.05 a little bit better. However, I guess if you do want that stiffer feel, maybe, then the Hali 1 will be the better option. But again, I like the MB.05 better. So there's the cushioning setup there. Moving on to the upper. So the upper here in the toe box is extremely different feeling, right? So here in the MB.05, first of all, the durability is going to be terrible for this material. Like, it's just so thin, it's so soft, so you're going to rip through this really quickly, you know what I mean? So just be careful with that. So I guess that's one thing the MB.05 isn't too good at. However, it's really thin and very minimal, right? So it's really comfortable here in the toe box. It conforms to your foot extremely well. It just feels so different from the pack of the shoe, which has a lot more padding, right? Here in the Hali 1, however, it's still really thin, but it's not as thin as MB.05. Like, look at this. Look at the actual difference. So MB.05, super duper easy to just press, right? The Hali 1, it has a little bit more resistance to it. You know, again, it's still really, really soft, but compared to the MB.05, this is just on a whole different level, right? So, yeah, I guess this is gonna be way better for durability. In terms of overall, like, quality of the material, however, I don't know, I feel like they're both kind of cheap feeling, you know, for 130 bucks. But yeah, the Hali one, again, it's a little bit stiffer, a little bit more rigid, but again, still super soft, especially once you break it in, you know? Here in the midfoot area, it stays actually really soft. I thought this kind of like fused material was gonna be like stiff, but it's not. Like, look at how soft it is, you know? And then here in the MB.05, of course, you do have this strap system. So because of the straps, and also I guess maybe they glued down the material a little bit more here in the midfoot, it does give it a more rigid and more supportive feel. Like, has really good structural support here in the midfoot. So that feels a little bit better for me. And then for the tongue, I would say the MB.05 feels a little bit more well padded. You know, it feels a little bit more cozy on top of your foot. They're both half booty construction tongues, giving you a better overall one-to-one fit. And also the MB.05 has some like straps, you know what I mean? The actual laces go through like these eyelets that connect to, or that are basically straps that go all the way down here into the midsole, and then the Hali one doesn't have anything like that, right? So I guess that's also another reason why there's a little bit more support in the midfoot. And then also here in the ankle area, the MB.05 definitely has more padding, right? It doesn't seem like a lot thicker, maybe just a tiny bit thicker here in the MB.05, but because it is a mid-cut, there's a lot more foam right over here, like going throughout the entire ankle area. For the Hali one, it's a little bit more just on top of the collar, you know what I mean, the heel area right over here. So the MB.05 definitely does feel a lot more cozy, a lot more comfortable in that way, right? So for me, I like the MB.05 a little bit better, you know what I mean? Like, it just feels so cozy and comfortable in the back of the shoe, and feels really soft and thin and minimal here in the forefoot, right here in the front of the shoe. The Hali one, I would say, is a little bit more well balanced, I guess, you know what I mean? It's not like it's thick here and then thin here. It's more just like a little bit more well-rounded. So I guess it all depends on what you like though, you know what I mean? But again, just watch out for the durability here for this material in the forefoot in the MB.05. So there's that. Now moving on to the fit. So I went up half a size for both of these shoes, and they're a little bit different, right, in terms of fit. So in the MB.05, I went up half a size because I'm in the MB.04, I went true to size, and it was really, really snug and really tight, right? So that's why I went up half a size for the MB.05, and this shoe fits me perfectly, right? So lengthwise, I'm good. Here in the toe box, it's also extremely snug, you know, like right when I first got it. It gets a little bit roomier once you break it in, but it's still a nice snug fit, you know what I mean? Also width wise, it is around normal width, right? Slightly narrow to normal width, so it's just a really nice fit for me going up half a size. The Hali ones, so because this shoe fit me well, and because it's a Puma, I was like, oh, I'll go up half a size for the Hali one, and that was a huge mistake. I would suggest just going true to size, right? So because of that, I also didn't really like playing in the Hali one because it's just so roomy here in the toe box, right? The toe box is extremely roomy. There's also a nice bit of length. So again, that's why I wish I went true to size in this shoe. And also for the width, it's a little bit wider because of that extra length, obviously. So because of all those reasons, again, I didn't really like the Hali one too much. And I feel like if I went true to size, I would have liked the Hali one a lot better, you know what I mean? So yeah, again, if you can, probably go true to size for this shoe and go up half a size for the MB.05. So there is the fit there. Moving on to the support and lockdown. So for lateral containment, I was good to go in both of these shoes. My foot is not coming out of the footbed at all. You know what I mean? For some reason, I was good here in the Hali ones, right? And then here in the MB.05, also I was good to go, you know? And also, again, like the upper overall does feel adequate for support as well. So my foot wasn't moving inside of the shoe too much either. In terms of lateral stability, they're both not bad. You know, they're both good for me. I didn't have any huge issues or anything. However, the Hali one is a little bit flatter. You guys can see the outsole curvature. You can see the Hali one is just way flatter here on the medial side, as well as here on the lateral side too. I don't know why the MB.05 has that curved shape. But again, MB.05, I didn't really have any issues with lateral instability. Just the Hali ones feel a little bit more stable, you know? And also in terms of heel lockdown, the heel lockdown was good for me in both of the shoes. One thing with the strap, however, you can feel it, you know, tighten over your midfoot just a tiny bit if you really crank down the straps, right? But it doesn't help too much. And also for the MB.05, you don't really get any type of ankle support. You know, if you want a little bit of restriction for the ankle mobility, even though this is a mid-top, it doesn't really do that. You know, it basically feels like a low. You have good ankle mobility in the MB.05, and obviously the Hali one is a low. So yeah, there is a supporting lockdown there. I mean, the MB.05 again was adequate for me, but if I were to nitpick, the Hali 1 just feels a little bit more supportive because of the stiffer sole of the shoe, right? And now moving on to the weight of the shoe. Right, the Hali 1 is around average, I think. Yeah, 13 ounces, a little bit heavier than average. And that MB.05 is 13.55 ounces. So the MB.05 is 0.5 ounces heavier. Interesting, right? So, yeah, I guess that does make sense because maybe the extra material here for the mid-top adds half an ounce. I don't know, but it doesn't really feel too different in weight. You know what I mean? Like the overall core feels pretty similar. Again, the biggest difference for me, I would say, is probably how the sole feels. You know what I mean? This is a way stiffer feel. The MB.05 is way softer, smoother, you know? So that, for me, that was the biggest difference. That's something that I really noticed when I was playing both of these shoes at the same time. Or I guess also switching from one shoe to the other, right? And in terms of which shoe is more responsive, it all depends. You know what I mean? I would say the Hali 1 is a little bit more responsive when I was playing on a clean court because the traction was just so good and it has a little bit more of like an explosive, stiffer feel, right? But I guess one thing that I really didn't like and one thing that made me feel really sluggish in the Hali 1 is the fit. Like my forefoot was swimming inside of the shoe, but again, that's not my fault, but it's just like the shoe was a little bit roomy, you know what I mean? But in the MB.05, I never experienced that. However, the cushion is a little bit softer, right? And when I was playing on a cleaner court, it didn't have as hard of a stop. But I guess when I was playing on a dustier court, I felt a little bit quicker here in the MB.05, right? So there is the weight there. Moving on to the ventilation, I would say the MB.05 is a little bit better for airflow here in the forefoot. But again, it is a mid-top design. Also, there is a lot more padding here in the back of the shoe. So it's warmer here in the back of the shoe compared to the Hali 1. So I guess overall ventilation, I'll pretty much tie it up. You know what I mean? And now moving on to the durability of the shoe. Yeah, I feel like the Hali 1 is going to be way more durable. You know what I mean? The upper, you got the overlays, the traction feels way more durable as well. The MB.05, first of all, the traction feels really soft, right? The rubber. And then the upper material feels extremely thin. You know, it doesn't feel durable at all. So yeah, durability is way better here in the Hali 1s. And now moving on to the aesthetics, the MB.05 looks way better, right? I hate this colorway, but some of the other colorways that are coming out actually look pretty nice. And I feel like I like the design a little bit more, especially that Volt colorway. That Volt colorway looks really nice. There's also a pretty nice red colorway as well. The Hali 1, they haven't really released any other ones, like any other colorways, but also like the overall design, not a huge fan of. You know what I mean? Like I feel like the MB.05 definitely grew on me, and I feel like this shoe looks way better. So tell us what you guys think looks better down in the comment section below. So wrapping things up, for me, I like the MB.05 way better. You know what I mean? I like the more flexible feel. The cushion feels better for me. The traction is way more consistent, especially on a dustier setting. I like the outsole curvature better. But I guess, again, if you're playing on a super clean court and you get a really good size where it's not super roomy, then yeah, I feel like you would like this, especially if you want more of like a stiffer and a little bit more supportive feel from your shoe. So I guess it's good for Puma to have a different feeling hoop shoe in their lineup. You know what I mean? Again, like this is a little bit more soft, a little bit more fluid. This is a little bit more stiffer, a little bit more rigid, right? So again, it all depends on what type of shoe you like to feel. But for me, I like the MB.05 a little bit better. So anyways, that about concludes my versus video between the Puma Hali 1 and the Puma MB.05. Again, if you guys do want to cop either of these shoes, I'll try to leave in the free link in the description box. But that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.